Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer, known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, carried out a series of murders between 1978 and 1991. Dahmer targeted young men, often luring them to his apartment with offers of money for nude photos or sex. Once inside, he drugged them with sleeping pills, mixed into drinks, then strangled them. After death, Dahmer engaged in necrophilia and dismembered the bodies in his bathroom. He disposed of the remains using acid or by discarding them. He also admitted to cannibalism, consuming parts such as the heart, liver, and muscle, believing it allowed victims to become a permanent part of him. Dahmer also attempted to create submissive zombies. He drilled holes into victims' skulls and injected substances like acid or boiling water into their brains. Victims such as Errol Lindsay and Conorak Synthesomphone were subjected to these experiments. One of the most disturbing incidents involved 14-year-old Conorak. After escaping Dahmer's apartment in a disoriented state, police were convinced by Dahmer that it was a domestic dispute and returned the boy to him, leading to his murder shortly after. The crimes ended on July 22, 1991, when Tracy Edwards escaped and alerted police. Inside Dahmer's apartment, officers discovered human heads, skulls, organs, a decomposing body in acid, and photographs documenting the killings. Dahmer was sentenced to 16 life terms. On November 28, 1994, he was killed in prison by Christopher Scarver, bringing an end to one of the most horrifying criminal cases in history. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy, known as the Killer Clown, murdered at least 33 boys and young men between 1972 and 1978 in the Chicago area. Gacy was a successful contractor and often performed as Pogo the Clown or Patches at local events and charities. Behind that image, he targeted victims aged roughly 9 to 27. He typically lured victims by offering construction jobs through his company, PDM Contractors, or by using money and drugs. Once inside his home, Gacy restrained them using the handcuff trick, which left victims locked and unable to escape. He then subdued them further with alcohol or chloroform. After immobilizing them, Gacy assaulted and tortured his victims. He forced objects into their mouths to silence them, then carried out prolonged abuse. His primary method of killing was ligature strangulation using a rope, often tightening it with a twisting motion. His first known victim, Timothy McCoy, was stabbed repeatedly. What made the case especially horrifying was how he disposed of the bodies. Gacy turned his house into a burial site. Police later discovered 28 bodies in the crawl space beneath his home and garage, where he used lime to accelerate decomposition and mask the odor. When space ran out, he dumped several more bodies into the nearby Des Plaines River. Despite the stench, Gacy deceived those around him, blaming it on dead rodents or plumbing issues. His crimes unraveled after the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Peast, leading investigators into his home. After years of appeals, Gacy was executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994, ending one of the most disturbing murder cases in U.S. history. BTK. Dennis Rader, known as the BTK Killer, short for Bind, Torture, Kill, carried out a series of murder between 1974 and 1991 in Wichita, Kansas. Rader carefully trolled for victims, studying their routines before striking. He typically broke into their homes, armed with a gun or knife, then restrained them by binding their hands and feet. His primary method of killing was strangulation, using ropes, belts, or nylon stockings. His first and most shocking crime occurred on January 15, 1974, when he murdered the Otero family, Joseph and Julie, along with 2 of their children. In a particularly disturbing act, he hanged Josie in the basement after killing the rest. Later that year, he attacked Catherine Bright, stabbing and strangling her to death. In 1997, Rader killed Shirley Vian after locking her children in a bathroom, and Nancy Fox, whom he strangled before calling 911 himself to report the crime. His final victim, Dolores Davis, was murdered in 1991, and her body was discarded under a bridge. What made Rader especially disturbing was his double life. He was a church council president, a Boy Scout leader, and worked in security installation. To neighbors, he appeared to be a devoted husband and father. He kept trophies from the victims and taunted police with letters describing his crimes. After years of silence, he resurfaced in 2004 seeking attention. His capture came from a critical mistake. A floppy disk he sent to police was traced back to his church, revealing his identity. DNA evidence later confirmed it. Rader was arrested in 2005 and sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, ending decades of terror. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy, one of the most notorious killers of the 1970s, carried out a series of murders between 1974 and 1978, across at least 7 U.S. states. Bundy primarily targeted young women, often college students between 15 and 25 years old. His youngest confirmed victim, Kimberly Leach, was just 12. Bundy approached victims in public places, pretending to be injured, wearing a cast or using crutches, and asked for help carrying items to his Volkswagen Beetle. Sometimes he impersonated authority figures like police officers. Once the victim got close, he struck them unconscious with a crowbar, then abducted them. Bundy usually killed by strangulation. He returned to crime scenes with decomposing bodies. He decapitated at least 12 victims and kept some of their heads as trophies. He performed disturbing rituals, including cleaning and grooming the remains. One of the most violent attacks occurred at the Chi Omega sorority house in Florida after his second escape from custody in 1977. In less than 15 minutes, he assaulted 4 women, killing Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy, and severely injuring Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler. A bite mark left on Lisa Levy became critical forensic evidence used to identify him. After 2 dramatic escapes, Bundy was captured again in Florida in 1978. He was sentenced to death in multiple trials. On January 24, 1989, Bundy was executed in the electric chair, ending one of the most disturbing killing sprees in modern history. Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper emerged in 1888 in the slums of Whitechapel and Spitalfields, East London, terrorizing the whole city. All victims were impoverished women, mostly working as prostitutes. Jack typically attacked in the early morning, strangling victims before slashing their throats deeply from ear to ear. What set him apart was the extreme mutilation. He opened their abdomen and removed organs such as the uterus, kidneys, and sometimes the heart, suggesting possible anatomical knowledge. The first confirmed victim, Mary Ann Nichols, was found on August 31, 1888, with her throat cut and abdomen mutilated. Annie Chapman, killed on September 8, suffered even more extensive organ removal. On September 30 came the double event. Elizabeth Stride was found with only a throat wound, likely because the killer was interrupted. Just 45 minutes later, Catherine Eddowes was discovered severely mutilated, with organs removed and her face disfigured. The final and most horrific case was that of Mary Jane Kelly on November 9, 1888. Killed indoors, her body was mutilated beyond recognition, dismembered and organs removed, marking the peak of brutality. The killer taunted authorities with letters, including the Dear Boss letter, which included the name Jack the Ripper, and the From Hell letter, sent with half a human kidney. Despite numerous suspects, including Aaron Kosminski, his identity has never been confirmed. The Zodiac Killer. The Zodiac Killer is one of America's most mysterious serial killers, active in Northern California during the late 1960s and early 1970s. He targeted young couples parked in secluded areas, ambushing them at night with sudden, brutal attacks. Some victims were shot at close range, others were stabbed repeatedly as he moved silently through the darkness. After each assault, he vanished into the trees or back roads, leaving almost no trace for investigators to follow. His infamous nickname came from the strange symbol he used to sign his letter, a circle with a cross through it, and from the way he called himself Zodiac in his messages. For years, the Zodiac mailed cryptic messages to newspapers and police departments, mocking investigators for their failures. Many of these letters contained coded symbols and puzzles he claimed would reveal his identity. Only some of the ciphers were ever solved. Despite manhunts, hundreds of suspects, and national attention, no one was ever arrested. The Zodiac Killer's identity remains unknown, securing his place as one of the most enigmatic killers in criminal history. H. Holmes. H. Holmes was America's first serial killer with his infamous murder castle during the late 19th century in Chicago. He lured travelers, job seekers, and women into a 3-story building he designed specifically for killing. At first, it looked like an ordinary hotel, but once inside, victims followed him down narrow hallways, unaware that many doors locked only from the outside. He guided victims into airtight rooms, then sealed the door and released gas through pipes, watching as victims died. Others he subdued with poison before lowering into the basement. There, Holmes used acid baths to dissolve flesh and incinerated remains in a large furnace. Some skeletons he later sold to medical schools as anatomical specimens. He was finally captured in 1894 after investigators unraveled his insurance fraud schemes and linked him to more than 200 disappearances. In 1895, Holmes was convicted of murder and sentenced to death, meeting his end at the gallows the following year. Andrei Chikatilo. Andrei Chikatilo, known as the Butcher of Rostov, stalked the Soviet Union from the late 1970s to 1990. He was preying on women, runaways, and schoolchildren traveling alone. He approached victims at bus stops, train stations, or inside crowded markets, offering food, money, or simply a sympathetic ear. As he gained their trust, he led them into forests, abandoned lots, or remote countryside paths, places where no one would hear a struggle. The moment a victim's guard dropped, Chikatilo stabbed, slashed, and mutilated his victims in frenzied bursts of violence, often gouging eyes or dismembering bodies, in ways that horrified even veteran investigators. Many victims were left in pieces, scattered under branches or brush. By the late 1980s, investigators finally connected the string of disappearances. Chikatilo was placed under surveillance after behaving suspiciously near a train station. Arrested in 1990, he eventually confessed to 52 murders. In 1992, he was convicted and executed by firing squad. Night Stalker. Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, was an American serial killer who operated in Southern California from 1984 to 1985. Striking under the cover of darkness, Ramirez targeted victims of all ages, breaking into their homes while they slept. Once inside a house, Ramirez moved silently through rooms, using whatever weapons he found. Knives from the kitchen, hammers, tire irons, even guns. He often overpowered victims in their sleep, shooting them at close range or stabbing them repeatedly. In some cases, he tied them up, assaulted them, and mutilated their bodies before ransacking the home for valuables. Ramirez carved pentagrams into the skin of several victims or left satanic writings on walls, heightening the terror of his crimes. In 1985, he was identified and captured after a group of citizens recognized him and chased him down. Ramirez was convicted of multiple counts of murder and violent crimes, receiving multiple death sentences. He died in June 2013 while awaiting execution at San Quentin State Prison. Israel Keyes. Israel Keyes is considered the smartest serial killer in the U.S., known for his meticulous planning and calculated approach to murder. On February 1, 2012, Keyes kidnapped Koenig, a coffee booth employee, from her workplace in Anchorage, Alaska. He took her debit card and other property, brutally assaulted her, and ultimately strangled her with a rope. After demanding $30,000 in ransom from Koenig's family, Keyes dismembered her body and disposed of it in Matanuska Lake. At that time, police were able to track withdrawals from her account as he moved throughout the state. On the morning of March 13, 2012, Keyes withdrew money from the ATM from Koenig's account, which led the police to discover him through the ATM camera and arrest him in the parking lot of the cafe in Texas. Once in custody, Keyes began confessing to additional murders, though he refused to give full details. He admitted to killing at least 8 people across the U.S. Keyes also enjoyed manipulating investigators, giving partial information and withholding key details. In December 2012, before standing trial, Keyes ended his life in his Anchorage jail cell by cutting his wrists and strangling himself. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and tell me which story you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.